many of us know about the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash. And we had a robust discussion in our class about that it's really the four sisters or the four siblings, because human beings are part of that too. Human beings are the ones that choose those seeds and plant them together, and that the three sisters wouldn't quite be the three sisters unless there was another sibling involved.
This is the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. Revitalizing the world together. Welcome to the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. This is your host, Neil Collins. It is a show that is supported by our work at Latitude Realty. In it, we explore our natural and built environments and how they can be used as a force for good. The show sets out to inspire impactful ideas, meaningful change, human wellness, and ecological restoration through interviews and easy-to-digest conversations. Our guests range from industry leaders to iconoclasts, from both well-known figures to everyday people leading extraordinary lives. This is a show for people looking for education and inspiration on how real estate can be done differently. Hey everybody, welcome back to another show of the Regenerative Real Estate Podcast. And I have been really looking forward to this show, actually this guest and the stories that hopefully will unfold today with Mark Voss out of Madison, Wisconsin. And I got to tell you, Mark, this morning, I was getting ready for this podcast, and my wife, Alyssa, who you know, was walking out the door with her son, Lucas. They are going to school. And she said, Neil, do you know who your podcast guest is today? And I said, yeah, it's this incredible guy, urban farmer, real estate professional, just a lot to give. I've really been trying to get this guy on the show for a long time now. She's like, oh my God, he's got to meet Mark. And so it is truly a pleasure to finally have you on the show, Mark.
That's a great story.
Yes. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Neil. It's quite an honor to be with you. As you know, I've gotten so much inspiration and knowledge from the titans of regenerative thinking that you've had on the show. And I hope that I have something to offer here to the listeners.
Well, that's a great place to pick up, because I think that you do have something to offer. And if anything, there's a lot of storylines about your life and about what you've been doing that I know little snippets of that I'd like to pick up the thread. So if anything, this is more a self-interested inquiry into who you are and how you have come to do what you're doing, which is really, as I see it, understanding land and real estate and community and wholeness. And it is something that I think is best picked up, as with a lot of the shows, of where did you grow up and what was childhood like? Because I know that you headed off abroad. And so maybe that gap of growing up to young adulthood would be a great place to start.
Sure. Well, right now I'm an urban gardener, or urban farmer. So as I was preparing to talk to you today, I was kind of reflecting about what were some of the first experiences that I had with the urban landscape and gardens. And I remember some times when my brother Aaron and I were at a babysitter's house, and it was like in the summertime, and we wanted to run around and just be free, but we were sort of restricted to the yard. And so we discovered this mulberry tree, and he and I would just I just remember being at this babysitter's house for a couple of, maybe it was just a week. It seemed like a long time, but we just climbed in that mulberry tree, and we must have picked every single mulberry out of that mulberry tree. And it was just like it was a great experience together. And it was also just a real exploration. And I remember too, my dad traveled a lot. And I remember one year he had a a garden and tomato plants that needed to be watered during the week when he was gone, and just the carrying the buckets, the heavy bucket, the 5-gallon buckets of water out to the tomatoes. And so I had a couple of experiences that I put my finger on, but I was just had sort of a normal Midwestern upbringing, and was, active in some sports in high school, and, got good grades and everything. But it was one particular class, I think, that sort of ignited my interest in pursuing academics and going to college. And it was Fred Walk's economics class. And this was in the 80s. So it was Reagan and Milton Friedman and supply side economics and return to the gold standard and the stock market. And it was like, I was on fire. Like I was became this conservative economic wonk, and ended up becoming an econ major at the University of Illinois in Urbana, and was excited about learning more about economics. And I was also interested in traveling the world, as you mentioned, and ended up signing up to study in France as a junior in college. And as that time approached to leave in the fall of my junior year, I realized that I hadn't really seen the United States very much. And so I asked my roommate at the time, one of 6, Brady, if he'd like to go on a little cross-country adventure and see some different parts of the United States. So when I went to France, I could talk to my new French friends and know something about the United States and where I came from, besides Illinois, and I had spent summers also at my grandparents' house in Wisconsin on Lake Geneva. And so I knew that area, and I knew central Illinois. And that's really, my knowledge of my own country was pretty limited. So we loaded up in 1974 powder blue Ford Pinto, and we started driving. And we drove to Iowa City, Iowa, where his sister Nicole was studying in graduate school in English. Stayed with her for a little while. And then we headed straight south to New Orleans. And I know that you're from Louisiana, so this might be interesting to you, that I had an awakening in Louisiana, and it changed me. We were driving on I-55 headed towards New Orleans, and we were on this, these elevated pylons, this causeway with, it just blew my mind that there was this, probably even at that time, multi-billion-dollar structure that was cruising, and people were cruising at 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. And just on the other side of that were people living in abject poverty in the bayous. And it just it slapped me hard in the face. And I shrugged off my previous sort of conservative values and just thought, there's got to be a way that we can pull together and make sure that everybody is taken care of, because that wasn't being done. Our priorities were wrong. So I had a great time in New Orleans. I met people from around the world who were staying in the hostel there. And Brady and I continued on through Florida and up to Washington, D.C. and to New York City and on and back. And then off to France I went. So I wasn't expecting to go there, but it was a real epiphany that I had. And it was a real shift in my mindset as I traveled across the United States. And I'm so glad I did.
Yeah, it's amazing to see different cultures, even within the United States' borders. And whenever you go to a place like Louisiana, that it is it could be its own country, because the culture is so different. And it's got this amalgamation of French and Italian and Creole and African heritages that really blend together to create something truly fascinating. And so it doesn't surprise me that you had something stir there. And I know that you've now gone to France, but you are also another Peace Corps volunteer, like myself. Where did you end up going to Peace Corps? And why did you go to Peace Corps?
Yeah. So when I came back from my great experience studying abroad in France, and when I was in France, I traveled around a fair bit in Europe. At that time, it was pre the Berlin Wall coming down, and so there was the Eastern Europe was still influenced by the Soviet Union at that time, and I did go to Eastern Europe a little bit and explore that, and I also went to Africa. I went to Tunisia. And so when I came back to the United States, I really wanted to spend more time abroad and work rather than study. And so the Peace Corps seemed like a great opportunity to do that. And I also just didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I needed some time to sort of explore what I had to offer and how I was going to offer it. And so having a chance to live abroad and work and learn about a new culture seemed like a really good way for me to kind of parse out my place in the world. And so I went to Togo, and I didn't know where Togo was before the Peace Corps told me that I was going to Togo. I did request a French speaking country because I felt like that was something that I had some proficiency in. And being from Central Illinois, the Peace Corps decided that I must know, it just must be in my DNA that I knew about agriculture, even though those two experiences that I shared with you earlier were about all that I had in terms of agricultural experience. But I was put in a program where I would advise farmers on simple accounting methods for agricultural cooperatives. And so with my economics background, I guess I had something to share with the farmers in that regard. So I'll just share with you that that's where another big shift came, a big epiphany for me, was as an agricultural cooperatives volunteer. One of my jobs, besides to advise the farmers on simple accounting methods for their cooperatives, was at that time to take their orders for chemical fertilizers and pesticides. That was part of the Ag Extension Service offering. So I was pretty green at that time and went to one of the cooperatives that I was there to advise. It was up in the mountains of a village called Asere, and I had gotten to know them pretty well, had visited them several times, very friendly cooperative, and they were really happy to have me there to help them. And I said, well, today I'm here because I've been asked to take down your orders for pesticides and fertilizers. And so the president of the cooperative, who is, as I reflect on him, he was such a powerful force in my journey. He had polio as a child, so he walked with a cane, and I think it was his right leg was pretty shriveled. And he was a vegetarian, which is really unusual there, certainly at that time. And he was really respected. He was one of the best farmers in Asere. And he took me aside and he said, no disrespect, Mark, but we don't use any chemicals. And it might be good for you to know that we don't want our hard-earned money to go abroad to Europe and to the United States to pay for chemicals that are going to poison our land. And so we're not going to put any orders in this year, and we never do. And we use our animal manures and cover crops, and you can see as you look around, it's pretty rocky around here. They were on the ridge of a rocky mountain range, and they were some of the best farmers in the prefecture. Very productive. They worked hard. They had good harvests, and they did everything. They didn't call it organic, but that's what they did. They did it as they'd done for a long time before. So as I became more familiar with how they did their farming, we formed a deep friendship, and I went to them a lot for advice, not just about farming and about working with other farmers, but just about life and what was important to them, because they lived close to the land. They laughed a lot. They had good relationships. It was really a special village.
That's incredible to get that wisdom from an elder to say, you're welcome, but don't show up here peddling your pesticides.
he did it in such a gentle way too. Like I just was so open to what he had to say, and it made so much sense. And, I just put that responsibility aside. I didn't perform that duty during my Peace Corps service. That was not part of what I did.
Let's jump from there, where it sounds like the seeds of something got planted, of understanding that there is a different way, to your time in Japan. I want to try to make that bridge here. And
yeah, it's a big jump, but it's an important one. It's a good one. So I came back from the Peace Corps. I got my teaching degree in San Francisco and had some great professors that really thought outside the box about what education was, and learned so much from them. And so then I had my degree. I sort of knew what I was going to be when I grew up. I was going to teach, but I also knew that I didn't want to teach in a conventional way in a conventional school, and that I wanted to create some kind of a learning experience for kids that happened on a farm, or it evolved in a garden, and where all of the disciplines would be there in the garden or on the farm, to create projects and to pursue learning, and through sort of a project-based approach. And so through a series of decisions and occurrences, I knew that I wanted to do that in Wisconsin. But I didn't have money, and I also still had that itch to travel more before I sort of ended up back in the Midwest and was going to sort of settle down, embark upon this farm school, or this big project. So I remember saying to myself, financially speaking, this is the best waste of time available. Not that anything that I did in that ensuing year and a half was a waste of time. It was, I just needed to, I knew that I needed to go and do something and earn some money and think a lot more, and sort of let that farm school idea marinate a little bit and develop. And so there was this great program called the Japanese Exchange of Teachers, and I applied for it and I got it. And they said, where would you like to be stationed? Where would you like to be posted? And I had come across, in between my Peace Corps days and my decision to go to Japan, I'd come across Masanobu Fukuoka's book, One Straw Revolution, which was had a big impact. And so I requested to be on the island of Shikoku, which is the most agricultural island in Japan. And I requested to be in Ehime Prefecture, which is where he lived. And I didn't get Ehime Prefecture, but I did get the island of Shikoku. So I was in Kochi Prefecture. And it was there that I had my first, well, I would say my second garden. In Togo, I had a garden with another Peace Corps volunteer, Bill Hanrahan, and we plowed that hectare with oxen. And that's another story. That's another episode. But I landed in Japan, and one of the first things I asked from my supervisor was if he knew anybody that had some land where I could garden. And I think that took him by surprise, because he wasn't a gardener, and he'd never, it was the last thing he expected one of his English teachers to ask him for. But he connected me with some farmers in the outlying area, and one of my fellow English teachers and I had a garden, and we used hand tools, and we connected with the local farmers there who were lending us their land, and they thought we were pretty funny, because we would ride our motorcycles or our bicycles out there all, as often as we could, working with our hand tools. And, they wanted to help us with their tractors. And we said, no, we just want to do this as simply as we could, being inspired by Fukuoka. And so I landed there in Kochi, and after asking for a place to garden, I asked if anybody knew Fukuoka, and could they help me meet him? And no one did. but I did get a friend to help me write a letter. And so it took a long time to arrange a meeting, and I only met him once, but I did have an audience with Masanobu Fukuoka, and he drew me a map of his property, and he said, he showed me where to go, and he was elderly at the time and did not accompany me out onto his property, but we had a long talk, and he explained what was there, and I knew from his books what I was going to find, and it was pretty amazing. And then on the back of the map, he sort of explained his philosophy that farming is the most direct path to God, which is pretty incredible. And so I have that piece of paper, and it inspires me to look at it. That I don't know if I accept his very specific one path to God approach that he was sharing with me, but I do know that gardening and farming and sharing that is a way to connect, and I've seen that again and again, and it brings me great joy.
Hey everybody, this is Neil. We are going to get back to this great conversation in just 1 second. But I think it's fair to say that right now we are facing some pretty unprecedented challenges in the 21st century. I mean, you name it, environmentally, socially, economically, we've got some big problems that we need to overcome. And that's why, for me personally, and the people that work with us at Latitude, we want to dedicate our time and our energy so that we are not only working to put food on the table and a roof over our heads, but also make the world a better place. And so if you are at all interested in combining your sustainability values with a very powerful financial model of real estate, then I highly encourage you to check out what we are doing at Latitude. We are creating something truly special with a tribe of change agents that for now is working across North America. And hopefully one day in the future, with you coming on board, we can be working across the globe. So please check us out. You can go to www.chooselatitude.com, or you can find us on social media at latitude.realty on Instagram, and we are also on Facebook. Okay, let's get back into it. That is something that really actually gives me chills, because if we're looking at the threads of our work and really the roots of the philosophy of regeneration, Masanobu Fukuoka in the One Straw Revolution ranks pretty high on the list. That I discovered him during a Peace Corps service as well. And this is where it's crazy, because we have so many different parallels in our story of serving as an agriculture extension officer in the Peace Corps, and then really trying to understand the world and finding these inspirational sources like the One Straw Revolution that showcases a different way. And to make a pilgrimage, even if you met him just once, but to say, I want to be on this island, which is quite removed from the rest of Japan, I would say, or not removed, but a little bit off the beaten path, to then go directly to the source is pretty incredible. And it sounds like by this point, the seed has fully germinated, and you're starting to see how agriculture can play the connector, the teacher, the grounding force. And so let's continue from here. And I want to pick up where you had mentioned that you had already decided to get a teaching degree. You wanted to go to Wisconsin. Why teaching? And what did you want to teach outside of being on a farm to do it?
Yeah, my teaching license that I got in California before going to Japan was in social studies, broad field social studies, and French. And so that's just was what my background was. So those were the things that were sort of obvious without going back to school and focusing in agronomy or something like that. But what became clear to me was that all of the important disciplines, or all disciplines, can be learned on on a farm. You can write and read literature about growing food and being connected to a rural landscape. The history is there. Certainly biology and chemistry are there. Math is there for, construction and planning and projecting, and statistics and economics is there. So it just seemed like such a fertile place for students to have an experience. And it could be, I think that in those days, my thinking was like a semester where students could come and spend a semester and really explore their curiosity and propose projects and have enough time to plan it and execute it and reflect on it. And so when I got back from Japan and went back to Wisconsin, I knew that that's what my ultimate goal was. But apart from having a few experiences in Togo and Japan growing my own food, I didn't know how to farm. And so I came to South Central Wisconsin, to the Madison area, and spoke with some people that I trusted about how I should learn about farming. And I got through a series of conversations, I got connected to a farm in southeastern Wisconsin that was a community-supported agriculture farm, organic and biodynamic. And it was located adjacent to, really close to, Michael Field's Agricultural Institute, which is a really powerful biodynamic think tank. And Michael Fields, in turn, was associated and got a lot of inspiration from Dick and Ruth Zinnecker, who were biodynamic practitioners and really had sort of this direct line back to Germany and Switzerland to Steiner. And I was so privileged to be like doing the daily work of raising vegetables for a community of subscribers and having frequent interactions with the Zinneckers and Michael Fields. In fact, one of my favorite learning memories is having breakfast with Dick and Ruth and having Ruth's amazing fresh baked rolls with farm butter, and just hearing Ruth and Dick talk about how they farmed and how they gardened. And they talked so much, not just about raising the plants and they were also dairy farmers and animal husbandry of the herd, but how they brought the community into what they did. And they had frequent community gatherings where people would bring food together and we would do different rituals and that had to do with the biodynamic preparations and honoring different seasonal changes. And I grew a lot. It was really impactful to be in that place. And I just knew that I was there to learn so that then I could have that knowledge and become a CSA farmer myself, and then hopefully teach in the future.
What do you think it was about biodynamics that really struck you? And go a little bit deeper on that, because I think this is another thread that really runs throughout the certainly regenerative agriculture field.
Yeah. I think, there's what resonates for me personally with biodynamics is that, and I have to be transparent that I don't understand it, but there's a connection between what biodynamics in my mind does is it creates a connection between the cosmos, cosmic energy, and the farm. And then in turn, between the farm and the people who are nourished from the farm because of the energies that are imbued via the biodynamic preparations. So again, I don't understand the alchemy there, but what I do know is that there are these codified routines and rituals and celebrations that bring the community together to gather essential ingredients for the biodynamic preparations. And then in the best case scenario, this community makes them together, buries them together, unearths them together, inoculates the compost pile together, and then takes them to their various gardens and farms and on and on. I think that was one thing that Ruth was always so excited about, was the idea that the energy and the nutrients and the nourishment was, through the preparations, were really spread far and wide around the region. And so when to this day, I use the biodynamic preparations in my compost pile, but as an urban farmer, I don't make my own compost. I don't have animals here. And so I get compost brought in, and then I inoculate my compost piles with biodynamic preparations, and share the fact that I do that with people that get seedlings from me, that those seedlings have the soil that has the biodynamic connection.
The overtones of community is really the thing that I pick up on. And taking that into a career, really, because it sounds like by now you're starting to get your feet under you. And I'm wanting to take this into the teaching track, as well as your urban farming track, of what did that look like over the years, and how did you combine the two, or maybe you didn't combine the two. But what did it look like to go into the school system, as well as to want to pursue farming in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a pretty agrarian friendly, or in farmer friendly place, if there is one.
Yeah, Madison, Wisconsin has so much to offer someone who wants to go into organic agriculture, and that's why I came here. There was a sensibility about food and local food that I had a feeling if I farmed well, I would find my tribe. And so I gathered together some friends, one of whom was my good friend and, for all intents and purposes, brother, Manny Francis, who I farmed in Japan with, joined me on my first farm in the Madison area, along with 3 other people. And we started a farm on some rented land called Drumlin Community Farm. And that's what we did. We did full time. There were 5 of us. We had this cooperative farm. And, I don't remember how many people we had. Maybe we had 60 members, something like that. And it was a great community. It was just so great. And we were successful. We fed a lot of people. We had several community festivals. And when it was time to renew our lease, I think that our landlord saw how much fun we were having and how successful we were. And they must have thought we were making a lot of money, because they doubled the rent. And we couldn't make that work. So we just put the word out to our community that we needed to move. And it broke our hearts, because we'd put so much into developing that space. And we were really happy there. It was rural, but nearby. And one of our community members said, "We have a place for you in the city." And it was a 5-acre parcel in the city. And it was a field riddled with weeds, and it had a house on it. It was just amazing. And so we transplanted ourselves there into the city. It was around this time that I met my wife, Michelle, and we decided that we were going to start a family. So I'm kind of fast forwarding through this, but we had that urban space. We remained Drumlin Farm, and we brought together more community members, and we created a very productive space there too in the city. And so in those days, I was also substitute teaching in the wintertime. And so I had my foot in the door of public school teaching, and that was okay. It was really serving me. And fast forward a little bit more, and Michelle and I married, and we looked for farmland, and we just couldn't afford it. And so I took a job as a full-time teacher. It was offered to me by one of the teachers that I had substitute taught for a lot, retired. And so I stepped into that position. And as we were expecting a baby, I decided that I needed to have a little bit more conventional income, put it that way. And because we couldn't afford rural land at that time, we resolved that we were going to find a place in the city that we could in growing food for people. And so that's where we are now, here in Madison, on a third of an acre at Voss Organics. And because we're on a smaller footprint, we grow seedlings for gardeners, and then we have a couple of specialty crops. So we really specialized and brought in our production area to fit on our city plot, and pivoted in a way that we could still serve the community and still create a significant income for the family by growing seedlings.
What are the things that you grow?
We grow about 100 different varieties of seedlings for gardeners, from herbs to tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, squashes, broccoli, lettuce, edible flowers as well, artichokes, and on and on. And then we have a couple of specialty crops that we grow for harvest, and tomatoes and kale particularly, and then a few other things that we sell to restaurants. So we went from growing everything and harvesting everything and sending that out to our community, to still growing everything, but sort of sending it out as babies, and then asking people to grow on their land, in their gardens, and providing some help along the way through newsletters and being available at farmers markets to answer questions and things like that. So that's where the teaching comes in. And if I can just rewind just a little bit, when I did become a full-time teacher in the public school system, I also became the sort of the ambassador or the advocate for a school garden. And so, although I didn't found a full-fledged farm school in those days, I did create a school garden program, and I joined together with other teachers who were interested in that and motivated students. And so as I traveled through different schools in the school system, I always created a school garden, or revitalized a school garden that might have been had been there, but had a small footprint, both in the curriculum as well as like in physical space. So that's something that I look back on with some pride, is that I sort of left school gardens in my wake wherever I was.
At some point, I know that you picked up Robin Wall Kimmerer, and you started to incorporate themes from her voice and her body of wisdom into the schools. Let's go there. Yeah.
So just a little bit of background. For most of my teaching career, I was a French teacher, and there's a lot of food system education that you can bring in via French culture, and so that was always part of the curriculum that I taught, both in the high school and the middle schools. We talked about gastronomy, and we talked about terroir and how important local food is in the French culture. And then 3 years ago, there was an opening in the charter high school in our district, which is a project-based, place-based school, and that teachers have a little bit more latitude in terms of the curriculum that they teach. And so I was able to step out of my French teacher role, or my French teacher sort of bumpers, and I was able to teach what I was passionate about. And there was a model at that school, Clark Street Community School, that allowed teachers to team teach. And so you could really lean into the strengths that you each had as a team. And so I, for my last class that I taught last year, we taught a class called The Honorable Harvest. which was based on Robin Wall Kimmerer. Braiding Sweetgrass was the anchor text. I taught it with my colleague Heather, who was a science teacher. And we explored botany, how plants grow, but also how indigenous wisdom and scientific knowledge can cooperate in our understanding of the natural world, and how humanity is integral in the life of plants. And that was another epiphany for me. It was like, I've even all these years that I've been a gardener and a farmer and feeling really connected to the land and to the plants, I always have thought of myself as separate. And it was through my reading and my discussions with my colleagues and my students that I realized that, I think maybe for the first time, but certainly in a new depth, that we are so important to plants, that we're a partner in the life of plants. And, certainly not all plants, but plants that are important to us. And that's I'm speechless thinking about it. Like it's so important for us to be able to feel that we are connected in that way. Many of us know about the three sisters: corn, beans, and squash. And we had a robust discussion in our class about that. It's really the four sisters or the four siblings, because human beings are part of that too. Human beings are the ones that choose those seeds and plant them together, and that the three sisters wouldn't quite be the three sisters unless there was another sibling involved.
Wow, I've actually never heard that or thought that, but what an amazing way to really frame the reciprocity that we have with the relationship to place and with plants, in nature, in ourselves. I would like to take that class.
I would like to take it again.
Yeah, and maybe we can convince Robin Wall Kimmerer to share her wisdom and her story as well. And so this is where I think I see the connection points, and I'm curious about a transition towards real estate. Because you have talked about terroir and community, and also weaving in education and development of people and place. You're active in a community farmers market. And so you just seem to have all these various elements of regeneration and of community and sustainability and ways in which we can live that is different from the dominant culture that does exist. To see you go into the field of real estate, why did you go that direction?
I've had a curiosity about real estate since I had my son, who's now 22, on my lap late at night and seeing a real estate investment ad on TV, and nothing else was on. And so I had this it sort of struck me as being interesting. And that germ was there, that seed was there from long ago, but it was in the last, I'd say 7 or 8 years, that I began to think of real estate as being a vehicle for change. And I don't think that I had the language for it until I met you, Neil, and Alyssa, and Latitude. But it resonated with me. And I had my real estate license several years before, and I was looking for a way to articulate the synergy between my work as a farmer and as a teacher and my expression of myself as a real estate professional. And it really is about stewardship. And when we acquire a property through the purchase of real estate, or, frankly, even as a resident renter, if we really think about it, there's a stewardship responsibility there. And we have the capacity to do good work on our land, whether it be an urban property, a suburban property, or a rural property. And I want to be an instrument of education for my clients who newly acquire a property, who are looking at a conventional property and want to see the possibility. If I can help them through conversation and connecting them with other service providers who can bring that regenerative lens, that to me it's the highest service. And I, through the work that I've done with buyers this last year, since I've been a member of the Latitude Collective, I've been able to see movement in regeneration as I connect them with service providers to do energy assessments so that they can increase the efficiency of the building envelope as they explore renewable energy, as they explore changing their lawn into an edible landscape and harvesting rainwater to put onto the gardens and onto the landscape. And then even discussing, although not acting on yet, at least not that I'm going to broadcast publicly on the podcast here, but exploring pre-legal approaches to gray water recycling and other things. So it's exciting. It's exciting to work with these clients who've become friends, to help them wherever they are to get to wherever they want to go. And I'm not the expert, but I can be a connector, and I love learning right along with them.
And you say that you might not be the expert, but what's so extraordinary is that you actually have shown through a very tangible example a story of transformation of what can be, even in an urban setting. And that's what's so fun to know that you have such a body of work and experience of really walking the walk before you even talk the talk, and to really help shepherd and guide people through that process of not just how do we go find our dream home, but how do we create something that could exist. And I see you as being able to ask such generative questions that unlocks a lot of the possibility in that. Where I think that I'm curious about how you see yourself within the real estate industry is what really excites you about the possibilities that are on the horizon from your eyes.
Being an educator, I think that I have a lot of passion about education, and I feel like not just educating my particular clients who I'm helping in a transaction, but just putting out there to all potential real estate clients that they should expect their real estate professional to have fluency in educating them about how to steward their property once they've acquired it. I feel like that's the work of our age right now, is to make where we live no longer part of the extractive economy, but part of the productive economy, going from a footprint of negativity to a handprint of positivity. And I have a lot of gratitude to Latitude for putting me in touch with the Living Future Institute, International Living Future Institute, which and I've been through their accreditation, and they have an ambassador program that allows education to go out to people, not just people who are in the building professions, but all people who live in structures and work in structures, and to have a sensibility that the built environment can be an instrument of positive social change. So that's what I'm excited about, is talking to young people who are in school, maybe in high school or in college, and exposing them through coursework to this lens of regeneration in the built environment.
Mark, it's truly an extraordinary example of a life well lived. And I'm sure it hasn't been without roller coasters as life is, but it's deeply inspiring. And there is an amazing storyline that I'm glad that we at least get to scratch on, because I'm sure we could go even further. If people wanted to check out your work, because you've got a couple of different things going on, what is a good way for people to find more about you and maybe the seedling business that you have and your real estate business?
Yeah, well, they can check out VossOrganics.com for seedlings and musings about life in the garden, or they can go to chooselatitude.com/Mark Voss for my bio and recent transactions and my network of ecosystem service providers here in Madison and South Central Wisconsin.
Yeah, fantastic. Mark, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for truly being a leader in the regenerative real estate space and a leader in your community, because I don't think that Madison would be what it is without even if it was just a very different reality of what you had in your head, to see the work that you've done there. What an amazing experience, and we're blessed to have you as part of Latitude. So thank you for coming on today.
Well, it's been a real privilege, Neil. I've learned so much from your other podcast guests, and I've been looking forward to being with you today. So thank you for having me.
Okay, everyone, that is a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in to another great episode. If you're not already a subscriber, please do so wherever you get your podcast. You can create good karma by leaving a review on Apple Podcast or sharing this show with your friends. If you're looking for ways to get more involved in the regenerative real estate movement, then you are in luck. We have a Facebook community conveniently called Regenerative Real Estate that you can join and be a co-creator with us on this journey. If you have a business or organization that you feel is aligned with our mission to use real estate as the catalyst for a regenerative future and would like to work together, then please be sure to get in touch. We are building an ecosystem to help amplify your work and message, where you can present to our community or sponsor the work that we are doing. You can do this by reaching out to us at team@chooselatitude.com. Last, and certainly not least, this podcast is enabled by the people that buy and sell real estate with us through our network of Latitude regenerative change agents located across North America. Our goal is to help transform homes and habitats, person by person, property by property. And we do that by combining the skills of a real estate professional with sustainable and regenerative consultation. It is time that we all start to live our values, and we hope to work with you on your next real estate sale or purchase. Okay, that is all for now. In the words of Paul Hawkins, remember that we are either stealing our future or healing our future. We are hard at work trying to do the latter. So until next time, be well.